Hey, I'm in the green room and having so much fun. I'm super excited. Most of you probably already know Adam Bielanski. He is the founder and CEO of Sierra Pacific Group. And we are going to talk today about his brand new book, hot off the presses, Scaling with Purpose. Adam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to be here. I love this topic. I love hanging out and being on this side. This first time, well, I wouldn't say first time, less than a handful of times. So excited to be on this side being interviewed rather than doing the interviewing.
Yes, you'll have to tell me how I do when we're done. Oh, all right. So, for those that don't know you, could you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and then tell us why you wrote the book.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So back in 2002, long time ago, started my own MSP business out in California, running my business, going absolutely crazy with it. It grew. We were really micro focused on radiology clinics in the area, so really in the medical field. I got ConnectWise suite of tools in my business in 2006, original, like way back in the day, right? Went through the financial struggles, right? And this is my first big lesson and intro. And this is kind of what changed my path and changed my career. Is I went through a financial collapse. I didn't run my business by the numbers. I just was not managing per the KPIs that needed to be. So I literally went from 20 employees down to 10 employees, struggled mightily. And then I was like, lost my house through a short sale, and humbled, if you will. I got my ass kicked, right? And it's an experience I don't want anybody to live through. And so I started like, the life can't be this way. Running a business can't be this way. I'm constantly putting out fires, constantly stressed. It's just chaos. And just I went through a lot of depression and so forth. So I kind of took that moment in my life and started to say, hey, what can I do different? And started learning, teaching myself, reading books, and consulting, executing on different things in my systems and processes to be able to grow and scale my company. Went from 10 employees back up to 20 employees, and then kind of found my passion through that. So in 2012, started doing some ConnectWise consulting, and then grew. Basically, it's like, hey, consulting's taken off, and also the MSP is kind of doing its thing. Kind of made it so scalable. I didn't have to be in my business day to day. So in 2016, I sold my MSP business and just focused 100% strictly on ConnectWise consulting. And today we're a team of over 45 individuals, consultants, awesome, amazing team. Super thrilled to be what we're doing today is scaling and growing and implementing and integrating systems and processes into everybody's business, an MSP business, right? And it's super critical to get those systems dialed in, know the numbers you're running into, because I don't want you guys to go through what I've gone through, because it's personal for me, right? And so when I share things about all these different things, it's the mindset, like it's a lot.
All
So
right. So,
that's a little
hold
intro to
that.
me.
No, I love it. Hold that thought on mindset because that's actually going to be our first topic. But I love that you're willing to share that story. My one of my favorite illustrations is the whole concept of the iceberg. People see the tip of the iceberg. They see the success. They see the team growing. I sold a company. I have a second company. It's wildly successful as well. But then what is below the surface are the agonizing days, letting half your team go, rebuilding that, probably a little bit of looking in the mirror and saying, you big doofus, why'd you do that? Like all of those things that are below the surface, nobody talks about. So I appreciate you sharing the story. And so your book, it's called Scaling with Purpose. That I know, with the subtitle, A Roadmap for Managed Service Providers Seeking Substantial, probably that too, sustainable growth. So I like that. And growth is the key word because I want to talk about growth mindset versus scarcity mindset. Um, when did that, well, first of all, define it for us and then share from your story when that shifted, and how, whether or not that was a struggle, especially as you were kind of rebuilding.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, there's a couple things play into this particular growth mindset and scarcity mindset, right? Growth mindset, you're obviously always constantly wanting to grow. You have the idea of, always looking to improve yourself. The improvement, I think, is constantly looking forward to improve, right? That's kind of like the growth mindset. When you look at like the scarcity, it's like it's one of those things where I micro niched, and I didn't know what I was doing back then. I niched in a niche, right? And I'm similar situation, right? When you go into those situations, it's like, ooh, I might not have enough of, leads. I might not have enough sales opportunity. I might not have various different things. But we live in a world today where I think that you need to become what's called a micro celebrity in your space, right? And that's embracing that whole, scarcity and going down that path. Okay, all right, it might be limited, but you know what? I'm going to be the best person in that particular space, right? So then that's the growth mindset within that actually scarce space, right? I think that there's what drives that growth mindset versus that scarcity is fear as well, right? Scared to make these execution. And quite often my team comes to me, Adam, like, really, you want to go down this path? And I'm like, you know what? The faster we fail, the faster we know it's going to work or not. So why not try it, right? And more often than not, I've been lucky, and I've just had a certain skill set. I had a certain experience. I just know things go out. And they have been, and that's what has built our company today, is pushing those boundaries, pushing the limits of what we do today.
But there is an aspect of, if you have a growth mindset and you're like, okay, we've executed on a growth strategy or a marketing campaign and it didn't work well. Like, we're going through this conversation internally that we've been executing on something really well for a quarter, and it's simply not performing. It's not coming anywhere close to the benchmarks that we set. A scarcity minded person would be like, that didn't work, therefore marketing doesn't work ever, never. I'm gonna hang up my hat, the end. I'm just gonna be the size I am now forever. Or I am a loser, I couldn't make this work. And instead I said, okay, this has worked for other people. Let's look at the numbers. Let's figure out why it didn't work for us. Did we do something wrong? We still may kill it. We still may say we gave it our best effort and it didn't work, and that's okay from the numbers and the analysis, but it isn't going to impact who I am at my core.
Exactly.
And that's that growth mindset. So
for sure.
Yeah, love it. So how much of a struggle was that for you, though, as you're saying, okay, I believe that there's a lot of business out there. I believe we're all getting a little bit better every day, but I'm also looking at my MSP business that isn't growing, and in fact is shrinking so much that I had to let half my team go. How much of a fight was that, like, in your own head? A little bit of cognitive dissonance, maybe.
It was a big fight. And I appreciate you, for kind of reframing that a little bit when it comes to growth and scarcity mindset. And, I want to say fear and doubt probably was the biggest driver for me, right? Being able to do this today, I would have 10 years ago said, absolutely not. There's no way. I'm not an extrovert. I'm an introvert. I'm an engineer. But I've taught myself, trained myself, worked through all these things, worked through it, learned to talk to a camera, and then the individuals behind the camera and the audience that we're watching today, right? There was a lot of demons, right? Fought a lot of depression, and it's like having to go through that, because at the same time, when you go through that, half those people were my high school buddies, right? And when you have to go terminate a high school buddy because they're underperforming like that, you kind of lose a friendship as well.
Yeah.
And so it was a double-edged sword for me. It was like really like personal. It was really, it was a lot, overwhelming, but I was so sick to my stomach, so like in bed. I think I spent like a week or two in bed, just like in a room, just not like the anxiety from the whole chest and everything. And to get through that, it's like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to use this as a turning point in my life, and take a moment to grow and do the continuous improvement. And I think that's the theme underlying everything that I do is continuously learning, continuous improvement right now, right? I as an engineer, like, bump into a problem, back in the day and just stop, like, yep, give up, didn't work. But you brought up to something where, hey, you're on a ship, you're crossing the ocean, not the Titanic. So there's going to be different currents that are come in, and it's going to push you off course a little bit. but you know your destination's still there, right? And so if you stay true to you and say, hey, maybe this campaign didn't work. What can we change and modify, enhance? And it's just the 1% tweaks that all you have to do. One big thing is part of this growth mindset is I've learned through a coach of mine, Taki Moore, runs a community called Black Belt. Amazing coach, amazing. And it was all he kind of reframed done is better than perfect. So get things done and execute on it, and then make those little tweaks, that 1% tweak, right? As you go. And I think that's because I've seen so many times that people have built something so perfect, so beautiful, looks beautiful. They go to execute on it, and it is falls apart because it wasn't right,
Yeah.
right? So let's just try the market, do some sort of initiative. Doesn't have to be perfect, and then if it does work in some way, polish it off, make it pretty, right?
I love your illustration about the boat and the currents. I often talk. There's a statistic about airplanes that I think it's 80% of the time they're actually off course, and so they course correct and they kind of overcorrect, and they course correct and they overcorrect, but they always land in the same place, in the right place. Like I've never heard about an airplane lands in New York City and they're like, oh, I thought I was in LA.
Yep.
You're like, no,
Yeah.
they land where they're supposed to land. But what you don't see is the airplane pilot in the middle of the air, like turning off the airplane and being like, let's just stop for a moment and regroup. Like, no, you got to keep going. You can't just stop. It doesn't work that way. So
Yeah.
awesome.
Sure.
So one of the things that you talk about in your book is in the terms of not stopping and thinking in an expansive way is this concept of expanding beyond just your geography, which I have never thought about before. So where does that idea come from?
That idea comes from actually doing it myself, right? I learned a lot. Again, another one of those situations where I acquired a company in a certain demographic and certain geographic area, right? And it was 3 hours away from where my home base was. So I service this area about an hour around my office, and most clients usually are within an hour around their geographical location, right? So I was like, oh, cool, this sounds great. Let's just expand. One thing led to another. It's like, oh, I got to get an office up there. I have to drive technicians. Oh, wait, I got to hire technicians up there. And it's just all these little points that of things of failure, right? And so, right now, especially in the marketplace today, M&A is huge, huge. There's 75 PE firms in the industry, 25 that are active in the industry today. So we're only a third active of the PEs, right? So it's going to be huge once they start becoming more and more active. Well, as an MSP business, right? If you have that geographical location, I would say locked down, but you have it pretty well. And we were microserviced around radiology, right? So we did have to expand into different areas and geographical markets because doctors would talk to other doctors, and then it's kind of a referral network. So there was a lot of lessons learned in that. So I would encourage, make sure you understand the laws in that area, tax codes, and understand the full operating cost. What is your marketing strategy around it? Are you building a sales team, right? We acquired a business and just sat there and we were just spending money, and the cost to travel and technicians back and forth to sit in a car for 2 hours a day, one way. It just ended up costing us a lot more money than the acquisition. So.
All right. So if you are just joining us, I'm chatting with author Adam Bielanski, author of Scaling with Purpose. I know. Are you used to hearing that yet?
I'm not used to it. It's like fiance. It's like, oh, it's a new term.
All right. So we're chatting about your book. And another thing that you talk about that I love is collaboration. Unpack that for us. Help us understand that.
Yeah. So this is a term I actually recently kind of developed, and I want to kind of edit the book and put it in this. And this is something that, as I grew my business and as I'm working with very prominent individuals in the space and businesses at the top, collaborate. and businesses typically at the bottom compete. And I see that through and through. Like, I'm working with quite a few different consulting agencies now, and it's just we're in the collaboration mode. Hey, what's working for you? Hey, how's your business doing this? Hey, how's and that's really important. Hey, what unique services do you offer so that I can actually recommend your services to my clients, right? What tool set are you doing, offering, right? And the MSPs, same way, right? Hey, are you guys doing backup services really awesome? Hey, are you doing security services really awesome? Maybe I'm lacking those things. Collaborate. Eventually, because it's an M&A market, you might eventually do what's a roll up and bring those together and dominate that particular market space. So that's kind of that mindset, right? When it comes growth mindset with that collaboration piece is keeping it. I'm a positive person, positive attitude, positive outcome, right? And that's one of those things like, I don't want to compete with anybody. I want to collaborate with people, work with
Yeah.
people. Hey, how can I help you? And then they can, same thing. It's like, hey, they'll help me eventually in some way, right? But it's not self-serving. So
Well, and it's interesting because we see that a lot in the vendor community. So right now, Channel Days is going on, and so this is, I don't know, 15 or 20 vendors that are all advertising this concept to their list, and there's prizes, and you can throw your name in the hat, and somebody's going to win the grand prize, and all of these things. That's collaboration. Like, they're all using one another to grow their lists, to get their logo out there. If they're smart, that will last all year, and they'll do some webinars together and some cross training and things like that. But at the very least, they are collaborating to grow their list, which is really the core of any marketing campaign. Is like, who are we going to market to? Who is our list? Let's bring this out of that theory, though, and bring it more into reality for the MSPs and MSSPs that are watching. How can they collaborate? Who should they collaborate with?
yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'm part of a very strong community, IT Nation. ConnectWise has put together a really, really amazing community. Right then and there's one big group within that community. It's called IT Nation Evolve. Be involved in peer group, right? That is like collaboration central, right? You're sharing your numbers. You're in non-geographical competing locations typically, and that's really super important because that's also building the trust, right? You have to build that trust and put yourself out there, and that's the first step, right? So I know I was involved in various different peer groups. I was involved in Taylor Business Group peer groups back in the day, long time ago when Larry Schultz owned that thing. So and so that dates me quite a bit, back when Arlen had HTG, right?
Yes.
And that was the first step for me in running my MSP business. Like, hey, let me collaborate with individuals that I know that have also my best interest, and they're not competing because they're different geographical locations. Let's start off with that. And then once I learned, like, oh, okay, they're just like me, just struggling. They're figuring it out themselves. Then I basically expand that circle, right? Like, oh, let's just talk to all of IT Nation, right? Let's just go out there and just talk with people because they own businesses. They have service techs, they have service managers that are dealing with the same issues you have, and how you guys can collaborate to help solve those particular problems. But then it's like, once you start doing that, you start learning the individuals, you start understanding their business a little bit more. Start understanding their services and what they're offering, how they're successful in their particular markets. And then you're learning. Continual learning is kind of that mindset, right? So just engage with somebody, even if they're in the same market. It's like, hey, what are you guys doing? Just learning what they're doing. And you share as well, right? So
I love it. Yeah, and a lot of my clients are really looking for local collaboration partners where they can do marketing together. So, maybe you are looking for an attorney that writes contracts for people like your clients, or a insurance salesperson that sells cyber liability insurance, and so you can put on an event together or something like that. So collaborate with your own network or your own niche, your IT Nation, your Evolves, that type of thing, to kind of figure out how you have these conversations and how this looks and feels, and then expand from there into your own local geography. So love collaboration. Yeah. I agree. It is so closely tied to the concept of abundance versus scarcity.
Yeah, I think there's some comments on there that I just want to kind of bring up. Some of us can't, learn what others are doing because we don't even have a clue what we're doing ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you really learn from that by asking questions, right? And then you figure out, hey, how are you doing it yourself? And that's where you start analyzing things and start understanding things when you start asking questions of others. So you actually asking questions of others are helping yourself out quite a bit, right?
Yeah, I love
And
that.
that is huge, huge. So
Yes. And sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. So someone asking us questions about what we're doing, and they're like, well, that's a great system. And you're like, I didn't know I had a system, but okay, cool. And so then you start to realize that you are doing some things right and things that are unique in the marketplace that maybe you overlooked, whether you're busy or you're hard on yourself or whatever. So yeah,
yeah.
love it. Love it. Okay, so one of the things that you're pretty passionate about is customer loyalty or the customer experience. And so you talked about this somewhat near the end of your book, but unpack this for us a little bit. I think it's apparent that when you're focused on growing and you're growing sustainably, that you have to hold on to as many of your current clients as possible. So once again, I'm guessing that this has some roots in your own personal experience. Help us understand maybe what you did right or what you
It
did
does.
wrong in
It
this
does.
particular aspect.
Yeah, it does. So yeah, when it comes to experience, a client experience, or customer experience, it's personal, right? I learned quite a bit. Raja Pagadaga, and he's from Great Britain, and it's taking care of the client and going above and beyond will make a bigger impression than the just not going above and beyond and just being that mediocre. What's going to set you apart from your competitors is the experience that you give, right? I know individuals that and companies that have literally a laptop breaks in airport. I'll bring it to TSA pre-check and just bring it right to the right before security, and they just come out of security, grab their laptop and go back in. That's the personal experience. That is like, I'm like, I don't know if I would even do that, but you know what? I want to be engaged in a company that actually does that. How come I can't get that experience, right? And
Right.
so that's the experience you want to do and share is you want to go above and beyond. Be engaged, be curious about the person's business that you're serving. That's going to make a more of a impact in their business by you being curious, by you understanding their business to help them grow, by leveraging technology, right? How can they leverage marketing in their business? What technology can they use to be able to help those various different things? What security parameters or security systems can you put in place to help protect their business, right? That insurance policy and understanding how they do business, where they do business, and being really truly engaged with the client, that's going to give that client experience and that purpose, right? And I think that that's super important as you grow and scale and make your niche and be different and unique.
I love that.
So
And you talked, it's just to tie two pieces together. You talked at the beginning of the book about thinking expansively and thinking outside of the box and how can I grow my book of business, maybe digital transformation or some things that you can do on top of your traditional managed services. And then now you're talking about customer service. Just to piggyback on your TSA concept, like TSA was like, or at least normal airport security was kind of the standard for the longest time. And then we got TSA pre-check, and then very quickly Clear came along. And so I don't know about you, I've got TSA pre-check, so I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I don't have to stand in the regular line. But I get a little bit annoyed by the Clear people because they walk up and like their eyeball gets scanned, and then they get like white glove service, and they
yeah,
step in front of my line, and I was feeling really special. So that is a great example of how somebody said, oh, you think TSA pre-check is that great? I'm going to go one step better, because we all like look at, okay, Blockbuster became Netflix. Well,
yep,
what's the next thing beyond that? So TSA became TSA pre-check, which, now there's Clear. What's
yep.
the next thing? Like, you're going to meet me at the door and escort me straight to, like, I'd probably pay for that. Like, I don't have to take off my shoes. I don't have to wait in
Yep.
line. I get like this special door color coded because like the gold
Yeah,
blue,
and
you know. I just so always be improving and iterating and thinking outside the box, and that's part of how you make yourself different.
yeah, it's more than just be always, and it's be engaged, right? quite often somebody sells somebody a computer and it's like, why are they using that computer? What do they need it for? What do they, ask questions? Hey, are you doing investing on this? Are you doing like what's going on? And granted, sometimes it can be personal. Sometimes it's like, yeah, this is just a personal computer. Okay, cool. I'm great. Is it for your kids? You have kids, right? And that's it's just more than just a device. It's access to the information systems. It's access to AI. It's access to a ton of stuff, and they could do tons of things with it. So how, be engaged, ask questions, right? And understand your clientele in detail. And, you know, that provides an experience. If I know, if I have a vendor that I'm paying and knows my business in and out, I'm going to, give them more business because I know that they're have my interest in mind, knowing that what I'm doing, where I'm going, and how much more business I can actually provide them by, engaging with them a bit more. So I don't know. It's a system that kind of just keeps feeding.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I love it. All right, so if you're just joining us, I'm here. We're talking with Adam, the author, Scaling with Purpose. Grab your book. It's on Amazon, correct?
It's only on Amazon. It's on Kindle as well, and there will soon be an audiobook.
Nice.
So,
I love it. I love
yeah.
it. Okay, one of the things that I loved inside of your book, and mine is wrinkled and it's got circles and lines and check boxes, and it is a marked up book. But one of the things that I loved is that I can tell you're a reader, maybe a voracious reader, because you kept like dropping these great book suggestions all the way throughout. So why don't we talk about a few of those as potential additional resources after you get and read Adam's book? You can then read some of these other books as supplemental resources.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah. And so it basically at the end of, to drop some knowledge, at the end of every chapter, I have a summarized wisdoms. And it's basically, I've learned a lot from reading. Typically what's funny is I'm audio, but I'm also a visual. So I listen to it and then I highlight as I go through it.
Oh,
And so I put it on
nice.
like 1.5 speed and on your audio, and then I just like highlight and just because I love taking little notes because I know that if I'm hearing it and then just writing it, it's going to program it.
Yes.
And so that's just the way that's the way I work. And so going through this book, and it's like, man, I was like, I just don't want to write conclusions to a chapter and just tell my own personal stories. I also want to reference good resources owners could use, or any business leader could use to be able to help them with their psychology, with their starting with why, Simon Sinek. I mean, there's a ton with EOS operating system traction, right?
Yes.
It's just, I mean, there's I put probably maybe 20 or 30 different references to various different books, so I don't know which one you're going to ask about. So
So I want to start with Carol Dweck and mindset, because that is such that you don't hear that book talked about a lot inside of our space. But I love mindset books. I love psychocybernetics, and like I have a minor in psychology, so anything that is around the psychology of selling, or psychology of making myself think better, evaluate the world better, I am all in. So I love Dweck. I love her writings. Why like that? I think that was the first not book recommendation, but the first book that you referenced specific to mindset. So how did that impact the way that you look at the world?
Yeah, it's really Carol around, like, I would say, she studies like the motivation, right? And I personally experienced a lot of these different things, and so what's funny is in preparing a lot of different notes and preparing different things, I even I was like, well, hey, what books are on psychology and what books are on this, and it's like you suddenly learn like, oh, that was me, right?
I read
And I just and it's like it's I school of hard knocks here, so um, you know, eh, talking about the motivation, what motivates people, right? Um, the why people want to succeed, and it's pretty powerful understanding the different outcomes, and bringing that psychology and developing that, right? I'm not saying this is where it's like it's a continual education, like like this again is the mindset of a man versus the mindset of a woman. It's like I'm still learning to communicate with my wife, right? And it's like And that's where it's like, okay, well, I'm not perfect, but I know kind of the framework and areas I need to work on, right? And I think that's what Carol kind of identifies and works through and helps me understand some of those various different things. So I don't know if I
Yeah.
answered your question.
No, that's fantastic. And so, if other than your own book, if someone is in this space where they're genuinely wanting to grow, maybe they are starting to plateau a little bit, or they've been stuck and stalled for a time, or maybe their path is similar to yours, where they're looking at their business and they're saying, "Oh, I'm now looking at the numbers for maybe for the first time in a while. I don't like those numbers." If there's one book that you would want them to read, other than your own, of course, what would be one great book to start with?
Man, there's so many.
I know there are.
But I think the one that actually drove it home for me was Simon Sinek's Start With Why.
Nice.
Um, because then you start asking, why am I doing this? What's like, that's where it starts inspiring the curiosity. And once you inspire that curiosity, then you can kind of get into the growth mindset. The like why, when you start asking that question of why am I doing this? What is like, that's where I think that's probably the foundation. For me, that's just for me, my experience. But then, I could say number two, number three, right, is I think EOS, the
Yes.
traction book is probably the second next one I would read, right? Now there's other books around that. Pinnacle just released a really, really amazing book. If you're not in the EOS world, there's that book, which is all encompassing, which I actually find EOS does its own, it's for an entrepreneur's operating system, right? Traction.
Yep.
But then, Pinnacle kind of brings the best of a lot of various different books and thoughts, and right. And so that's where, starting with the why is really super important, right? Because that's the curious mindset. And I wasn't really a curious person. And I think once I started becoming that curious person, I started asking why are we doing it this way? Right? Why do our customers want this? Why are we targeting a separate location? Right?
Mm,
Why? And I think that's going to start that mindset in the right direction.
love it. I love it. Yeah, one of the books that I recommended recently, this probably would not have been able to make it into your book because it got published about the same time, is Be Your Future Self Now. I don't know if you've read that, but it's got
No.
flavors of all throughout. It is going to quote books that you've read. Like the author is just so well read. His name is escaping me. That's another really good foundational, like, understand your why, but really the concept is identify what your 20 year from now self would be. So like 20 years from now, your daughter will be like 21. I don't remember exactly how old she is, but and let's say that you get home from work and your daughter's like, "Come play with me, daddy. Let's have a tea party," whatever. And yourself 20 years from now would do anything to have a tea party with the little 1 or 2 year old daughter. And so the concept is, why can I not be that person now? And that way I don't live with regrets, and I don't, whatever. And then there's even like, step into that greatness. You are that future person now. You just don't realize it. And so
Yeah,
it's a great book. It's really an awesome book.
for sure. And that's why it's like, I find the question to be very challenging. Is like, what book would you start off of? And it's, well, what problem in my life am I trying to solve?
Yes.
Right. And I think that you have to ask that question. And so quite often there's the, why am I doing this? And then it's like, as an MSP owner, when you're growing a business or trying to start a business, there's the lack of time as well. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you could have an EOS system which helps fix that stuff, but there's
Yeah.
another book out there, Dan Martell, Buy Back Your
Yes.
Time,
Yes.
is another huge one. And it's like, it depends on what problem you're trying to solve. And
Right.
if you're a small MSP business or you're just starting out, right, having that, understanding that why, but then also, hey, how you can buy back your time, because I think that's really super important. I learned through a Moo method. I kind of mentioned it a little bit in my book. It's it's the idea of getting milked, right? It's like I have all these tasks. I spent 5 days in a hospital running my MSP business through like just sheer amount of stress. I got sick, and it was pericarditis. So the doctors thought I was having a heart attack. Well, I
Sure.
spent 5 days in the hospital when I was in the peak of running my business, right? And I was like completely disconnected, and I couldn't manage my business. I thought I was going to collapse, and pretty sure like the mindset around getting milk and moo method is write down everything you do in your 40-hour work week, right? Okay, now let's say, hey, that's all the things you do in a week. Now let's actually break it down in half. What do you do in 20 hours if you could only work 20 hours a week? Here's the things you do, right? You narrow the list. Now, what if something crazy happened to me, that you can only work 2 hours in a week? What things would you do in your business in those 2 hours to be the most impactful and have the most impact? And you have those tasks. Your now sole job and sole role when you talk about your time is focusing strictly on that. And now all that other stuff, hire for, outsource for, subcontract, all that other stuff is I would say not. It's important, but it's not the most important thing,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
so that's Dean Jackson is the Moo Method. It's another kind of book. Unfortunately, it's School of Hard Knocks. I just lived it, right? And went through that exercise, and I was like, oh, Dean, and he's in Taki's, Taki Moore's coaching group, right? And so Dan Martell is as well. So,
Nice.
yeah, I mean, it's really personal for me because all these different things have different stories, and so that's why I was like, let me reference his books that really impacted me personally, rather than telling that personal story behind it, because I think that
Sure.
people are going to have those stories with and resonate with their books their own way.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so I'm gonna put up one more time your book title. Maybe there we go. Scaling with Purpose. I love it. Hold on, let's get them. Both of them get them up there.
There you go.
Love it. Adam Bielanski, author of this book. Grab it off of Amazon. It really is a great read. I think it is scribbled in and check marked and notes in the margins. The only book that I've done that with more is my Traction book, which is around here somewhere. So it's right up there with Traction. I just moved into my office. We just redid my basement, and we literally just threw the books on the shelf. They're not organized or color coded or anything. Otherwise, I'd be able to grab it for you. But great read. Definitely recommend it for anybody who's in the IT world, MSP, MSSP, IT company, VAR, reseller, who is looking to grow. And it's a roadmap, like literally a roadmap for managed service providers seeking sustainable growth. So we have just a couple more minutes. One of the things that you talk about way at the end or near the end is marketing, having a marketing system and a marketing framework. In 4 minutes or less, solve all of our marketing problems.
They can't do that. I think that part of marketing is, I believe it's all about being real and being genuine, being authentic, and how best to leverage that and market that aspect is very challenging, right? I think that part of a lot of what we do is, we give in public, we share information publicly, we give them, hey, here's what you need to do. If somebody asks a question within our Facebook group, here's what you're going to go do. By all means, I have a couple people within my Facebook group that have literally asked over the past 4 or 5 years every step in our implementation process, and they probably got it completely free, but they did it themselves, and I don't care. It's like, hey, here's here's the roadmap, do it. But it's like, we sell in private, right? And that's where it's really super important. So I try not to sell in my marketing. I just try to give information out in my marketing. And so, what can you do as an MSP business, right, to be able to have the appropriate marketing, to have, the right channels? And I think that's just, asking, again, asking what your target market is, really have it really super defined. The psychographical, I should say, information around who your client is, the size that you're targeting. Again, you can niche And it's a lot easier to niche and market to a niche if you do that, right? So you can talk to one certain individual and be the rock star at that particular space, right? I know MSPs that target just attorneys, like I did. I didn't know I was a niche back then. I didn't even know that word back then. So I was like, oh, I'm niched. Oh, okay. I didn't know that was a thing. And so that's where the abundance can come in, because then you're an expert in that space, and that's where it just grows, and it just is really, really huge. So
I love it. I
yeah,
feel like
I
you
mean,
just tied it up with a nice, neat bow, because we started with mindset and believing that there's a lot of business out there. We talked about collaboration and not seeing people as competition, but rather collaborate with people. And then marketing, leaning into relationships. And so that's kind of the thread that I feel like ties this whole conversation and ties your whole book together. So I love it. Adam,
yes,
thank you so much for joining me. Let me drop this on the screen one more time. Author of Scaling with Purpose. Grab this off of Amazon. And next event, to make sure that you connect with Adam. He'll probably sign it for you. That's a little
absolutely.
bit of a surreal experience when someone comes up to you and says, "Will you sign my book?" So I love it. Thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Awesome, guys. Thank you very much. Love being and sharing here and being on the other side of this. Let's do it
Awesome.
again.
Absolutely. Have a great day.